rule out on this Sunday show, and we are going to start off a little different from what I know from the normal. We're going to talk about a rule change before I start with the signings. Beginning announced Major League Baseball announced on Monday that to speed up the pace of play, now you're only going to see now that mound visits are now limited to 6 visits that are not pitching changes. So after the 6th mound visit, it'll be when it's time for a change, think speedy, oil change, and auto service. Your oil change, tune up, and smog experts. Little tribute, paying a little homage to the Bay Area baseball commercials. But they have defined the mound visits as a manager or a coach trip on the mound to meet with the pitcher, or a catcher leaving to calm down the pitcher. So that is going to get really tricky with a lot of catchers. Hello to Von Hook. That's going to be really tricky for catchers who want to calm down the pitchers. Now they're going to have to use good judgment when they need to come out on the mound to talk to the pitchers, and then conferences on the mound. But once all 6 non-pitching change visits have been exhausted by a team, they can appeal to the umpires to make a mound visits, for example, for a cross-up between signs. So that will get very interesting to see if catchers try to sandbag the rule by intentionally mixing up signals with the pitcher in order to not have that count against one of those mound visits or not. But that's going to get really interesting. Another rule change that they're making this year is all the bullpen phones are going to be changed in order to crack down on sign stealing this year. So we'll see how that works out. But they're going to be cracking down on teams stealing signs this year. So hopefully that works out with the new bullpen phones. And now the league office, I think, is going to be monitoring the bullpen phones this year. So we'll see what works that. But it'll be interesting. And then the commercial breaks are going to be just a skosh shorter to speed up the game. So these are all new pace of play initiatives, and it's good and bad. I'm not too crazy about it in a way, because there's times where, say, a pitcher's rattled early in a game and that mound visit's gonna by the pitching coach or something's really gonna hurt, especially if, say, a starting pitcher is really struggling with a short outing and you have to get a long reliever warmed up out of the pen. It's really going to hurt some of these relievers in their warm-up time getting out of the pen, and it could put a lot of strain on these pitchers that have runners on. So we'll see how that works out, but that's my only concern about it is some of these games where your pitcher's having a short outing. It's going to hurt because you can't calm them down like you used to. You're just going to have to bring the hook sooner than later on some of these short outings. But we'll see what happens as we go through the spring training and stuff. And now on to the signings and whatnot. The Braves designate Mauricio Cabrera for assignment to make room for Peter Moylan. And the Braves agree to terms with Peter Moylan to the league minimum if he is with a $625,000 roster bonus if he makes the opening day roster. But this is his 3rd stint with the Braves, and he's hoping maybe this time it can stick around for Atlanta. But hopefully he can add to the late inning mix of Aroydis Vizcaino and Jose Ramirez. but we'll see how he does with his return to Atlanta this year. The Arizona Diamondbacks signed Jared Dyson to a 1 year, $3.5 million contract. But it's a 2 year contract for 7.5 million. Excuse me. And he's definitely could be a good leadoff hitter for the D-backs. And he's a good defensive outfielder and could maybe platoon with AJ Pollock in center and also platoon with Yasmani Tomas. So probably you're going to see Dyson be the fourth outfielder for the Diamondbacks, and he could definitely be a base stealer and a good leadoff hitter for Arizona. So he may not be a power bat, but he's definitely got some speed. So he's really does help the D-backs lineup a bit there. And the Padres designate Rocky Gale for assignment. But we'll see if he is invited to the camp competition or not for the Padres. Pirates acquire Bruce Bentz on a waiver claim from the Boston organization for cash considerations and is likely for minor league depth. And in a three-way trade, the New York Yankees acquire Brandon Drury. The Yankees acquire Brandon Drury. Souza will go to the Arizona Diamondbacks. And the Rays will get Anthony Banda and a player to be named later, along with minor league second baseman Nick Solak from the Yankees and Tyler Widener to the D-backs. And Souza is definitely a guy who can add power for the Diamondbacks and could hit well over there at Chase Field. But he does not hit for average, so that is a little bit of a lot of a concern for Arizona, but he definitely will be a utility player for Arizona, and that's definitely going to add some bench depth there. And Drury definitely helps with the infield situation for the New York Yankees. I could see Drury plugging in at third next year as a stopgap for the Yankees. So we'll see how Drury does in that role. And Drury can definitely slash. So yeah, he slashed a 267 last year with 13 homers. But he's definitely could be a good defensive third baseman for the. He certainly could be a good defensive third baseman for the Yankees next year. And the corresponding move, they've designated Jabari Blash for assignment and was claimed by the by the Los Angeles Angels. And then Orioles designate Jacob Bergman for assignment as Chris Tillman resigns with the Baltimore Orioles. And to a 1 year contract. It's a major league contract. He's definitely will probably be middle innings. I don't see him competing against Sean Doolittle for late innings. innings, but I certainly could see Benoit be a seventh inning pitcher next year for the Nationals next year. And yeah, of course, they got Kinsler too. So yeah, I certainly think he'll be an. I don't even think Benoit will even be a factor in the late innings. I could see Benoit being more of a guy coming in for middle relief or to eat innings. So we'll see. But his velocity was on the decline a bit last year, and we'll see how he does. I think he's just going to be more in use to eat innings for the Diamondbacks. Astros prospect Forrest Whitley suspended for 50 games for PEDs. The Miami Marlins signed Cameron Maybin to a 1-year, $3.25 million contract. Definitely a bridge option in the outfield after all three of the outfielders were traded, and Ichiro Suzuki departed via free agency. It looks like Lewis Brinson's going to be one that's going to have his first attempt at the major league level. And they got Magneuris Sierra and Braxton Lee. I think but we'll see. I think he's definitely going to be in a mentor role for the Miami Marlins. We'll see how Cameron Maybin does. I certainly think he's trade bait if I think where the Marlins are going to be. Pirates Saunders to a minor league contract. He's been invited to play on the major league camp, so we'll see how that happens. Rays signed Carlos Gonzalez. Carlos Gomez to a 1-year contract. And that definitely could be a rebuild, as he did not have a good go around with the Astros, and Gogo could be coming to try to rebuild his value with the Rays this year. So we'll see what happens with that. And the Orioles re-signed Chris Tillman to a I think a 2-year contract. So we'll see what happens. And that definitely gets some much needed depth in the Orioles rotation. Yeah, I corrected myself on Gomez. It was Gogo, not Cargo. And Tillman will definitely probably slot into the number 3 spot. So, yeah, I still think the Orioles could use another starter before the season starts. Angels acquired a Jabari Blash from waivers and placed Alex Meyer on the 60-day disabled list. And I think Blash could definitely be but yeah, Blash has maybe barely hit 200, but he definitely could get an opportunity to be a bench player for the LA Angels. So we'll see what happens, or if he goes to Salt Lake. Indians signed Carlos Torres to a minor league contract. Give me a second. What? Give me time. All right. After the interruption, Pirates acquire Corey Dickerson from the Rays for cash. One million is part of the trade, and all in exchange, the Rays get Daniel Hudson and and minor league infielder Tristan Gray in cash considerations. I certainly think Dickerson could be a guy that could fill part of the void of Andrew McCutchen leaving Pittsburgh. He finished with a 282 average with 27 home runs, so I certainly think he's a power bat that could surprise people in Pittsburgh next year, so we'll see how he does. Or it could also be traded depending on where Pittsburgh is by the middle of the year. And the Red Sox are to sign JD Martinez once his physical is completed. That will be for a 5-year, $110 million contract. That has a 2.5 million buyout if he opts out, and he could opt out after the 2019 season. And it definitely gives the Red Sox a much needed power bat. And he could certainly hit some home runs off the Green Monster. So this is definitely the bat that the Red Sox needed, and now he will probably be in the DH role or a fourth outfielder. So we'll see. And then they re-sign Mitch Moreland. He's slotted to be the primary DH for the Red Sox next year and could be a fourth outfielder. And also, we could see Hanley Ramirez could head for the trading block here by the middle of the season or could head to waivers if he really struggles in the backup role this next year. And the Baltimore Orioles sign Colby Rasmus to a $3 million contract. But we'll see if he can bounce back after an injury-filled injury-filled season last couple of years in Tampa Bay. But this is a low-risk, high-reward for Rasmus, and I certainly think Rasmus definitely gives Baltimore a short-term bat option. And we'll see how that does for Baltimore. The Texas Rangers signed Jesse Chavez to a minor league contract. Oh, it's a major league contract for $1 million. If he's placed on the 20, it'll go to 1.5 million if he's on the major league roster. And he will take the spot of Joe Palumbo, who was moved to the 60-day disabled list. And certainly Chavez is one that's looking to bounce back with the Rangers after having an awful year last year with the Angels. And will probably be used as a swing man out of the pen. So we'll see what happens with that. And the Twins place JT Chargois on outright waivers. We'll see what happens. But he will be on the disabled list, it looks like. And if Chargois can survive his third year in AAA or if he falls out of favor in the Twin system. And the LA Dodgers claim Chargois off of waivers. And Julio Urias was transferred to the 60-day disabled list to clear a roster spot, and we'll see if he can certainly be a cheap option, maybe to make it out of the bullpen for the Dodgers this year, who are going to be on a tight budget this year as they continue to cut payroll in LA. But that just doesn't bode well that Julio Urias may not be playing this year, and that definitely makes the Dodgers rotation a whole lot weaker without Urias. And they're going to have to be more reliant on other guys on the farm to fill out the back end of the Dodgers rotation this year. Let's see what happens with that. The Detroit Tigers signed Francisco Liriano to a 1-year, $4 million contract with another $1 million in incentives. And Liriano will probably be one of those guys who's going to try to rebuild himself out of the Tigers' pen this year. It's certainly a buy low candidate or he could fill in the back end of the rotation with Michael Fulmer hurt and Jordan Zimmerman hurt. So we'll see what happens if he ends up out of the bullpen or if he's used in the starting rotation. He could compete with Blake Hardy and Daniel Stumpf out of the bullpen if he ends up in the Tigers bullpen this next year. The Tigers make a minor league deal with Louis Coleman, and they designate Jairo Labort for assignment to clear a roster spot for Liriano. And the Royals sign Michael Saunders to a minor league contract. But he certainly could end up being alongside of Alex Gordon. He's definitely one that could probably fill the left-handed side of the Royals batting order next year. Pirates signed Kevin Segras to a minor league contract with an invitation to spring training. Minnesota Twins signed Eric Ibar to a minor league contract, hoping to rebound from a tough year with the Friars, and only hit .234 last year, but he definitely could compete with Adrianza for a bench role next year for the Twins. So this year, excuse me, for the Twins. So we'll see what happens with that. The Cincinnati Reds signed Oliver Perez to a minor league contract. He can make the roster or not, but his concerns with him is his declining velocity. Cleveland Indians signed Matt Belisle from their rival Twins for a $1.5 million contract. And he definitely could be a candidate to close for the Indians next year, or certainly could be a setup man next year. Yeah, could definitely be a setup man next year for that. I'm now getting brain freeze. Could definitely be in the setup role for Andrew Miller next year. since he has some closer experience, but he definitely does give the Indians some depth in the late innings. So we'll see what happens with that. Orioles signed Pedro Alvarez to a minor league contract. And this is the third year for him in AAA, so we'll see what happens if he can finally crack the roster in Baltimore this year. Cleveland Indians signed Ben Taylor off of waivers. And to make room for him, Corey Anderson was put on the 60-day disabled list. And the Twins are to sign Logan Morrison to a $5.5 million contract with a $1.1 million buyout. And it looks like Morrison will probably go to first base. I could see Morrison and Mauer platoon at first, or I could see Morrison maybe play first while Joe Mauer slides to the DH role. Definitely gives Mauer some competition since this is going to be his last year on his contract with the Twins. So I think I wouldn't totally be surprised though if Morrison ends up playing first base for the Twins, and you see Joe Mauer slide to the DH role this year. So definitely a good pickup gives the Twins another bat, and they definitely look locked in. This is postseason or bust for the Twins this year. And the Cincinnati Reds signed Ben Revere to a minor league contract worth between $1 and $1.5 million. And that concludes the the wraparound of signings in major leagues this week. The Giants did make a roster move this week. They have designated Yohan Gregorio for assignment, and Gregorio was on the 40-man roster last year. He got suspended for PEDs and missed the second half of the season at AAA Sacramento. And he was DFA'd to make room for Tony Watson. Like, I don't know what's going to happen with Gregorio this year in Sacramento, if he's going to still be a starting pitcher or if he's going to possibly be used in a bullpen role this year. And I think Gregorio's career could be more of a reliever than a starter. So I certainly could see him getting more reps as a reliever this year and see how he does. But I don't know how the front office feels about him after the PEDs, and he's going to have to prove himself this year in Sacramento after he screwed up. So it's prove it time for Gregorio, and maybe being outrighted is what's going to get Gregorio motivated for this season. And I certainly think he could be a good bullpen. I think he was more destined to be a reliever than a starter at this point. So we'll see what happens. And now an update on the Oakland A's ballpark situation. Looks like Commissioner Rob Manfred has given his blessing for the Howard Terminal site for the Oakland A's. But it looks like the A's, and so it's looking like Howard Terminal is starting to emerge as the new favorite for the new ballpark for the Oakland A's. But it still has a lot of hurdles to clear before that gets any traction, gains any traction. There's still a lot of environmental hurdles that have to be done with Howard Terminal. It's not close to public transportation, and it could take a while to even build a ballpark on Howard Terminal, depending on how long it will take to clean up the site to make it viable for baseball. So, and this might be the last chance for the A's to get a ballpark done in Oakland is Howard Terminal. And this is something that the current mayor of Oakland, Libby Schaff, has wanted. So now this could go to the city council sooner than later. And now the big challenge is trying to privately finance it since the city of Oakland cannot publicly help the A's construct a new ballpark. So the next hurdle I think is going to be an environmental review of Howard Terminal, and we'll see how the environmental review goes through with that. But there's definitely a lot of work that's going to have to go into Howard Terminal before they even break ground on it. And I think the first thing is going to be an environmental review. But it certainly is a lot of cleanup that's going to have to be done with Howard Terminal in order to get a new to even get a ballpark constructed for the A's there. And it could be a nice AT&T type ballpark, maybe, maybe not. Or it could end up like Candlestick, where you're stuck having baseballs in the swirling wind. But the big perk of Howard Terminal that it is near Jack London Square, and it's fairly close to downtown. It's not quite as good as, and the only other option besides that would be the Coliseum parking lot, which is starting to look like a non-starter for the A's at this point. But certainly got the blessing of Rob Manfred, the commissioner. So certainly this is probably going to be the Hail Mary for the A's left. It's going to take a lot of cleanup and stuff, and it's going to come down to the environmental review at this point to see if a ballpark on Howard Terminal is even viable or not. And hopefully we'll have an update on this sooner than later, and we'll wish a lot of luck for them. I certainly know the Giants, and I love the Giants as much as I do. Unfortunately, I know the Giants want the A's gone. I know they want their territory rights. And if the Giants were to run the A's out of town, I certainly think they would love to say Las Vegas or Sacramento. I think they would certainly love to buy one of those two AAA teams and move it to San Jose. And I certainly think San Jose could be a good spot for AAA. And I certainly think they could construct a AAA ballpark by Diridon Station and have it somewhere relatively close to the Shark Tank, especially with Bart going to be down in downtown San Jose in the next 10 years. So certainly I think the Giants would love nothing more than to see the A's leave so they can bring a AAA team to San Jose. And I certainly think, Von Hook, I don't know. It's going to come down to financing. It's looking like it's starting to look like though that the city council's on now. It's about getting the city council on board of a ballpark at Howard Terminal, but I certainly think it's looking like Howard Terminal's starting to look like the front runner after the Laney College site fell through. So we'll see what happens. But as I said, unfortunately, the Giants are going to get the NIMBYs involved in stuff and try to slow it down as much as possible. Unfortunately, the Giants want those territory rights. I just have that feeling. But yeah, like I said, I think the Giants would love for, say, the A's to move to Sacramento so they can move the River Cats to San Jose And I certainly think the Giants are going to want to get their own AAA team, whether it's the River Cats or the 51s. I certainly think. And I'm going to go take a look at the new ballpark in Las Vegas in May. I'm going to be going to Vegas second week of May or so. So I'm hoping they're going to have a baseball game going on at the ballpark while I'm there. But we'll see. Like I said, I think now Caval and Schaff and the city council are on board with Howard Terminal. Now it's going to come down to the environmental review and how much a cleanup it's going to take before they can construct a ballpark on Howard Terminal. And I know the BART's against it since they can't. It's not close to BART, but maybe it would be closer to Amtrak if anything. So that's the only concern I have with Howard Terminal is it's far away from public transportation for the fans. So hopefully we'll get an update on that sooner than later on that. And now on to spring training notes for this week since guess what? Spring training started Friday. And we've now had 2 games in the books thus far. And Andrew Suarez looked pretty good in his first outing, and Suarez is definitely a candidate for the last spot in the Giants' rotation this year. But he did get a ground ball, and I think that if he can keep that up, certainly think Suarez is a guy that could crack the rotation. Ty Block, I definitely think Block wants to prove that he can still be a starter, a number 5 starter. He's definitely the front runner as of right now. Steven Dugar definitely looked pretty good in his first game. And Panda looked pretty good. I don't know how he is weight wise, but and then Hector Sanchez definitely will be on the 40-man roster. And unfortunately, I think Trevor Brown's going to be a DFA candidate after the spring training. And it looks like Mac Williamson's trying to change his stance at the plate, and hopefully that will work out. And this is a critical year for Mac Williamson as he definitely needs to have a bounce back year for the Giants in order to have any chance at staying in the Giants organization. I certainly think that at least to be trade bait, he needs to be good this year and he looked okay yesterday against the Dodgers. Miguel Gomez, long shot to make the roster. Chase D'Arnaud did not have a good day defensively, but he did okay at the plate. And Stephen O'Kurt, another pitcher who's a little bit under the gun, gave up a double, but he was okay. He got Puig with the strikeout, and this is definitely a critical spring training for Stephen O'Kurt. Roberto Gomez, he's probably going to be in AAA. He did okay. Chris Stratton, well, he still got some work to do. But he did do what he could get the side and stuff, and we'll see who's trending up and trending down next week as we get a full week of spring training in next Sunday. And now on to the most important part of the show, the AL Central preview. I will start with the 5 and go back up. Start with who's going to finish last and go to first. We're going to start my 5th place team. My last place team in the NL Central for this year is going to be the Detroit Tigers. Detroit's in a second year of a rebuild, and Chris Ilitch is just hoping that Jordan Zimmerman can get his trade value up so he can move him before the deadline. You've got a couple kids, Daniel Norris, Michael Fulmer, Fulmer's one that could be trade bait for the Tigers. And then I think Detroit's happy that V-Mart's coming off the books. So that definitely helps the Tigers next year with Victor Martinez coming off the books. And I certainly think that Miggy Cabrera could slide to a DH role after this year. But Detroit, they might lose 100 games this year. They'll be very close to losing 195 to 100 games this year, and it's just year 2 of a rebuild, and you're just going to see a lot of youngsters come up and as they continue to restock the farm in Detroit. So I think they're going to finish in dead last. 4th place, the Kansas City Royals. I think the Royals, that's another team that's going to be in rebuild mode, and I certainly think they have some pieces they could trade before this year's deadline. But I think beyond Danny Duffy and Kelvin Herrera, it's going to be a lot of growing pains in Kansas City this year, and they're hoping that Alex Gordon can rebound from a very disappointing campaign last year. But they need Alex Gordon to bounce back this year. I totally think Danny Duffy is going to be traded before this year's deadline. Same thing with Kelvin Herrera. I think definitely a team needing bullpen help. They're going to look at trading. Certainly, I think Kelvin Herrera is going to be traded before this year's deadline. But I think Kansas City, they're going to probably lose 90 games this year, and 80 to 90 games, and it's more about rebuilding the team. And I totally wouldn't be surprised if Ned Yost retires after this year in Kansas City, as they are a shell of their former selves from the 2015 World Series year. So I think they're 4th place. 3rd place this year, I think, will be the Chicago White Sox. They're definitely a young, up and coming team this year. They got Avisail Garcia. They've got Jose Abreu as power bats. And certainly a lot of these kids coming up from the Tigers pipeline has been pretty good. And I certainly think Lucas Giolito could be the ace this year for the White Sox if all things work out. But I think the youngsters are going to overachieve a bit this year are going to overachieve a skosh this year for the White Sox. So I certainly think the White Sox will finish 3rd place. They'll win somewhere between 70 and 75 games. And it wouldn't even be a total surprise if they're somewhere near 500. And I think Chicago would love nothing more to have James Shields have a good year so they can at least get some trade value out of James Shields. 2nd place will be the Minnesota Twins. And they are definitely an improved team, and they have really been starting to become aggressive players in free agency. And this is the last year of Joe Mauer's contract. I think he is a UFA after this year. Let me see. Is he a U? I'm going to take a look at his con. Yeah, he's after this year. Joe Mauer is a UFA for the Twins. So I certainly think they would love nothing more to get the Twins back to the postseason in what could be a Mauer's final year. And Mauer could go back and forth between first base and DHing this year with the addition of Logan Morrison. That definitely added some pop to the batting order. I really like the batting order this year. The rotation looks a bit better now with Odorizzi, and I think they got another signing there somewhere. You got Irvin Santana, Jake Odorizzi, Jose Barrios is a good one. You got Kirk Gibson, who Gibson had his ups and downs. You have Alberto Mejia or Phil Hughes too. So and then you got Anibal Sanchez. I certainly think the Twins will compete for a wild card spot this year, but I'm not sure that they will clinch a wild card spot with the Angels being better this year. So I right now will say the Twins barely miss out on a wild card, but they will finish second in the AL Central. And the Cleveland Indians will have their third straight first place season. They've definitely got the good rotation to do it. But the bats are, I think, though, the batting order is going to be a bit weaker this year with Santana off to Philadelphia. So that makes their batting order a bit weaker in Cleveland. But they've definitely got a good pipeline, and there could be some youngsters that could come and fill the void. And then you got Josh Tomlin, who could be a good bullpen guy this year. But I think Cleveland will have their third straight AL Central title this year. But I don't see them maybe going any further than the ALDS this year. I think they might win 90 games, 90 to 95 games, but with New York being better, Boston a little bit better, and the Astros the way they are, I certainly think Cleveland's going to get bounced by the divisional series this year. And that concludes my preview for this week. This will conclude this week's show. Next Sunday, we are going to preview the AL West, and we'll do a little preview on the Oakland A's. So thanks for tuning in. See you next Sunday. Peace, love, and soul. Good night, everybody.